listening to episode 158 of the Tennis Files podcast with special guest Jibran Mohammadi. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Tennis Files podcast. This is Mehrban a former Division I college tennis player. And on the show, I interview the world's top pros, coaches, and experts to help you improve your tennis game. And today I have a really fun and insightful interview with Jibran Mohammadi. And Jirban was a former ATP player. He played Davis Cup for Pakistan, and he has practiced and played with many legends of the sport like Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, Rafa Nadal, the Bryan brothers, Stefanos Tsitsipas, a really interesting match with Denis Shapovalov that we talk about. We talk about all of these experiences during the episode. And Jibran is currently a tennis coach in Toronto at the Granite Club. And funny enough, he coaches there with one of my friends and former college teammate, Irfan Shamazdan. Go Dogs. We both played at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and had a great time there. And one thing that I love myself when I listen to podcasts are the stories that are included as part of background for making a point or, approaches to life or anything like that. And so in this particular episode, we go into a lot of different experiences and stories and cool little tidbits that Jibran has had in relation to, whether it's his own career or really cool experiences with these great players. And it's certainly a long episode. But it's really enjoyable in my clearly unbiased opinion. And so I'm excited for you to listen to it. It was a lot of fun to talk to Jibran. And so without further ado, here is my interview with Jibran Mohammadi. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Tennis Files podcast. It's really a pleasure and an honor to have Jibran Mohammadi on the podcast. And Jibran has played with the greatest players in the world and has been on the ATP Tour. He's also coaching right now at the Granite Club in Toronto. And he's doing a great job as well on just like spreading the knowledge of tennis on social media. Jibran, welcome to the podcast, and it's great to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me, man. Keep up the great work. It's awesome to see your stuff online and with this podcast as well. It's awesome, man. So keep it up.
Thanks. Appreciate that, Jibran. And yeah, it's pretty cool because I noticed that, you've been getting some shares with a lot of your content. And didn't was it like either Tennis TV or ATP, didn't they share like some trick shots that you did recently?
So every once in a while, I just kind of, joke around and have a few trick shots in there and get them recorded, and I'll put them up there. And surprisingly, one morning I woke up and the ATP Tour, Insta page had tagged me on one of their posts with my trick shot as one of the votes to get it up and running. So I was pretty pumped about that, and I was sending it all out to my buddies and my contacts saying like, vote for me, man, vote for me. So it was exciting. Obviously it was pretty cool to be on there, but it was more just having fun, and it was pretty awesome.
That's great, man. And what do you remember? Well, you probably do. Which trick shot was that particular one?
So it was interesting. The very first one, there was actually surprisingly 2 weeks in a row, which I was very surprised. The first week was basically I tossed it around my back and kind of hit it behind my back with a serve. And then the next week I posted one up, and it was like hitting a serve with the handle of the racket. So they posted that one up too, which wasn't as crazy as the first one. I think the first one was a lot better. But thanks ATP Tour for sharing my trick shot. So that kind of got me pumped up, and I was like, hey man, I'm going to try to keep doing this just for the hell of it.
It's pretty sweet. And like, is that something that you've kind of toyed with like for a long period of time, or is it just kind of recent, like spur of the moment type of thing?
It was honestly just spur of the moment. And honestly, the cool thing about this whole Instagram thing is that you see other people doing stuff like Trick Shot Tuesday and this and that, and you kind of learn from, how they're kind of making things different and creative, and then you just kind of jump in and you have some fun, and that's basically how I took it. So it was it's cool. I'll do it every once in a while.
Sweet, man. So I just want to, I'm always interested to learn about how people got their start in tennis or, what inspired them to start. So, obviously, going to ask you that question now. How were you introduced to the game of tennis?
Well, it was interesting. I started playing like, soccer, basketball when I was young, just, out in the park, and my dad would watch me, and it'd be interesting because, I wouldn't want to pass the ball to anybody. I was a hog, right? So he saw that I was such a hog in other sports, and he's like, you know what? Let's look at some individual type of sports for this guy
Smart.
because he doesn't want to share playing with others. But no, I mean, so then he gave me a racket and a ball, and he said, "Look, man, here's a wall, and this is how you hit against the wall." And he wasn't a tennis player; he just really loved sports in general, and he loved tennis. He watched tennis a bunch, like growing up. So that's how I started. I started on the wall, and then ever since I was hooked, and I started playing tournaments and stuff. So I actually grew up playing tennis in Canada, and we used to live in the Niagara Falls area back in the day, and that's where we kind of got started in playing junior tennis in the local club, and one thing led to another with tournaments and this and that, and now we're here still. So
Yeah, awesome, man. And so, I've read a book called Range, which analyzed Roger Federer's, upbringing, which he practiced with him, and he played a bunch of sports when he was young. So I'm curious to ask you: do you feel like playing other sports actually helped your tennis career, which you obviously reached very high levels?
it definitely did. I mean, I remember in high school when I grew up a little more and started understanding that you got to share the ball and not be a hog. I played a bunch of basketball, a lot of street ball actually, just with friends after school and stuff, which sometimes would get me injured and in trouble with my dad because you'd be working hard to get ready for a tournament, and then I'd go up for a rebound, or I'd come down on someone's foot and turn my ankle. Like my ankles were, all my buddies actually make fun of me because I got skinny ankles. So they're like, man, you're always just turning your ankles, right? So, but no, I mean, it really helped to play those other games because it just gives you an ability to understand different types of movements, and also learning about the fact that you have to use your mind in different ways to excel in a certain sport, right? So it's definitely a benefit. I would definitely like I have my kids playing soccer. I got three boys at home, so it's a busy household. Play soccer before this whole COVID thing, and now they're starting to play tennis a little bit more once things have started to open up. But it's definitely something that I would have them focus on in terms of development for sure. So.
Yeah, definitely having them develop those athletic capabilities when they're young and so forth. Yeah, that's fantastic stuff, Jibran. And curious too, whenever I interview players who have reached a really high level like you, I'm curious about their training environment, especially when they're young. So, when I asked that for you, like, what was the training environment like, and did you like progress from one environment, like let's say just practicing with other players, to like an academy or something like that, or how was your environment like training?
So the interesting thing was when I first started here in Canada, and due to business and whatnot, my dad was actually working in the States as well. So we actually moved down to Houston for a bit. So I played junior tennis, on and off here, but not full on. Like I would probably take about one lesson a week back then when I was around 8, 9 years old. And then back in 95, 96, we actually moved down to the US. And that's where I actually started fully developing. And, their structure was a little bit different at that time in terms of academies and just more kids to play with in general, and having tennis courts full year round because obviously it's much colder here up in Canada. So you really have to find an indoor facility to get the hours up in terms of development. So yeah, no, I mean, I used to train at this actually pretty famous club, at least for the tennis guys that know, Westside Tennis Club down in Houston, Texas. It was the first tennis club that actually had all four Grand Slam surfaces, which is pretty neat. And they actually hosted the final eight, the ATP Tour tournament for the men's for 2 years in a row, which I think Fed won both years. I'm guessing one beating, I think, Hewitt in the finals, and then one Safin. I might be wrong on one of those, but yeah, no, it was pretty cool. But yeah, that was a great facility to train at, and there was this academy called King Daddy Sports that was running through that facility. And at that time, there was a bunch of juniors, like they had over 100, 150 juniors that were going through that program, which kind of fed right into playing junior tennis in terms of tournaments and lessons. So it was good exposure. And then also, the exposure in the US, to be honest, and even leading up into high school, they have quite a competitive full year round program that's set up where even if between the day after school, they still have structured stuff that you can do if you're not involved with tennis after school in an academy, which is nice. And then they have weekly or every bi-weekly matches, which keeps you going in terms of the competitive aspect if you're playing USTA plus high school matches, which was really cool. But yeah, no, I mean, personally, like we couldn't really afford really, really high performance stuff. Like honestly, back then too, I was probably taking 1 hour a week of privates, but then I was still involved with doing program stuff. So it was more, group stuff and get used to the atmosphere and the surroundings around you and just, set up practice matches. To be honest, my real training was really just playing a bunch of tournaments. I remember I'd play like 30 weeks in a row and I didn't care. Like that was my development. I would say I learned a lot from playing matches versus just training, because to be honest, we couldn't afford training full on like other kids were able to take like 4 lessons a week and then program time. But the atmosphere and the surrounding was really, really important for my development, at least in the US for sure, because of the kids and the tournaments and the weather, obviously. So that really helped, or else it would have been tougher for sure. So here in Canada, paying indoor fees and whatnot, right? I mean, it adds up. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, that's really admirable, that you're able to still play on the tour and all that, coming from not like a super rich type of place. And curious, with you playing so many tournaments, I mean, you were still able to work on your game, like, because I guess like if you're playing a ton of tournaments like that, for some people, like they might not be able to implement like different tactics or whatever, like unless they practice it a lot first. So was that an issue for you at all?
An interesting thing was, like, I would definitely say I was a huge late bloomer. I would play all the USTA events and every year, whether it was the Texas tournaments in terms of sectionals, and they have like this setup where it's champs, super champs, and then it goes into nationals and whatnot. But I remember my development in terms of progressing, at least ranking wise, and getting more in depth with tactics and strategy. I didn't really learn that until like my later years, like 17, 18 years old. Because, number one, if you're in a group environment, you don't really get too much individual attention. Mm-hmm. But yeah, some feedback here and there from coaches, and that one, lesson a week from coach Tom Corson, who is my local coach in Houston. He was like a serve volleyer, so he would tell me more about serve volley tactics and then also for my type of game style, which at that time I was more of a counter puncher with a decent serve. So, it was more about staying at the baseline and trying to grind it out from the back and trying to develop that game. But I felt like I was kind of taking bits and pieces because of the coaching wasn't fully there for me to actually. Now you watch kids that are just, they got the fitness, they got I would be doing fitness, to be honest, in my house. I'm doing dips on the chair and doing push-ups. And so it wasn't really a full-on structured thing for me in terms of once I started getting into university and that. But up until juniors, honestly, like the last year of 18s, I remember I played Kalamazoo. I got invited to Kalamazoo. And so every year, 16s, second year, 16, then first year, 18, like my ranking got better and better until I could finally play Kalamazoo, which is a huge honor. And I got invited to Easter Bowl. But unfortunately, we couldn't make that tournament and all those tournaments that are, down south in Florida. But I ended up, I remember my dad and I, we drove up to Kalamazoo from Houston, and, it was a great experience. You see all these players like Rajiv Ram, Brian Baker at that time that were successful tennis players. And it was a new thing for me, for sure. So because I was a late bloomer, all the exposure to that level was another dimension of play for sure. But it was bits and pieces. And then, once I started getting into university, then you get a little more guidance. You learn a little more about your physical ability and you get stronger, you get bigger, you get a little bit smarter. Yeah, and it was interesting. So I went to Tyler Junior College basically for a year. They were the top junior college in the country at that time, and so it was good. It was good. I mean, it was a smaller setup in terms of education. It was smaller classes, and tennis wise, they had a good program. Coach John Peterson, he had a great setup up there in terms of his teams and who he selected. We had a bunch of guys that were from the UK. We had 2 guys from the UK. We had a guy from France. We had a bunch of international players. So that gave me more exposure as well to get an idea of how Europeans play and then exposure to playing other teams. Like we played, I remember as a top junior college team, we also played TCU. We played a exhibition match with A&M. Like it was fun. So, we actually won nationals that year, which was fantastic. And that was an awesome experience. And then again, I learned so much about my playing ability and figured out ways to win. But I could definitely say that the private development was lacking in terms of really personal attention. And I felt like I was kind of self-learning and self-taught up until that point, because even in college and university, you'll get, more psychological backing in terms of on court, because the coaches can talk to you and tell you what to do in terms of before a match or after. At that time, I don't think it was allowed to. I think they've changed it up now where, coaches can actually, I might be wrong, can come onto court on the changeovers. Am I wrong there? Or?
I think they can. I think when I was playing, I think my coach came on and coached me, I think.
So that type of coaching of what you want to do tactically and, strategically in a match versus a certain guy that you might not have seen play before. And the outside eyes can definitely see some more than what you're trying to battle on the court, which was interesting. But that was a great experience. And, I won we were national champs that year. And, I was named All-American as well as other teammates. Nice. And so that was a really, really cool experience as well, leading up to college tennis. And then I actually I was only able to finish off 1 year because my father ended up getting a little bit ill, and then I had to come back to Canada because he was back and forth. So they came back to, once I started college, they came back to Canada to live here. And then my dad got a bit sick. So then I had to kind of change route and come back here and kind of start from scratch again in terms of training and then helping out the family in terms of priorities. I had to kind of rethink I wanted to go back to the second year, and unfortunately there's things didn't work out. And so I had to start kind of developing in Canada. And it was tough because I didn't know anybody here because I was gone for such a long time. This was probably 2004 was when I got back, because the year I played at Tyler was 2003. So yeah, so then I came back to Canada and then basically started my training back here with, an on and off kind of situation. It was frustrating time because I wanted to go back, wanted to be with my friends, and I wanted to be with the people that I wanted to win another title, right? It was awesome. Like we won one, and then, coach was telling us to get back, but it was a tough time. But this is where I kind of grew up, and then we came back and started developing from here, and went forward with trying to figure out how to meet new friends here and trying to build your contacts in terms of the training. The tough part here was all the top guys that were training, whether they were in university, they were away, or if they're on tour, they were traveling. They were down in, their bases were down in Florida or Europe, so there wasn't really a hub in Canada, so to speak. They would come in and train a little bit for a week or two if they had a week off, and then they would leave again, right? So it was tough, definitely, to find good players to train with here. It's this is where I had to kind of stick it out for a little bit, but I learned a lot about myself at that time as well, and this is where I started playing tournaments. But then I also had to work due to family circumstances, so I was kind of working / playing, so it wasn't a full on like let's go play some opens to make some money, also teach during the week, save up some money, and then go back out and try to that dream of being on tour was always there. That was my goal. So for many years, I just felt like I was kind of chasing my tail because, I was stuck in terms of trying to provide for the family, but also trying to have that goal and that dream of, hey, I can still do it and still get out there and play some events. So luckily, it was good to stick it out and play here. because, I was near family and I wouldn't take that back. Now, at that time, obviously, you can't see further. You're only looking at that time. But now I look back and I said, I look at it and I say the development and the mental strength that I built up from from those tough times in terms of training in tough circumstances. And it really definitely made me a better player, but also a better person, I guess. So yeah, you again, and I'll tell my students on court too. It's such a beautiful sport, but you learn a lot about yourself that'll help you off the court as well as on the court, which is important, right? I mean, you learn a lot about yourself and things that you can. Because of tennis, I know if I put my mind to something else that I want to get better at, I know I can do that because the challenges that I saw in tennis in terms of the training and sticking it out and grinding through and really, I call it suffering, right? Suffering for your goals and trying to move forward even through tough circumstances, I think makes you and molds you into a better human being. So I think that's more important because tennis is temporary, right? It's there, we love it, but we want to be better human beings.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's really the key that you mentioned there towards the end about a lot of times we're faced with these difficult decisions where we want to be lazy, but if we seek the discomfort and take action, that's where we'll improve and become better and, take these obstacles and turn them into opportunities. So something that's really interesting here that especially for a lot of people listening is that you mentioned about self-development. And that's obviously a lot of us players we need to do that, especially if we don't have a ton of coaching. So what are some strategies for self-development? Maybe you playing like all these tournaments in a row, comparing that to USTA players playing a ton of USTA matches and then just a few practices here and there. So what are some ways to really actually improve yourself, versus just like playing the same old game every single match?
No, that's a great question. The way I kind of would go about it now, because as you develop, you grow and think about the game in different ways. It's important to, at least the way I grew up, I had to play a bunch of matches to kind of develop and learn about myself versus really getting one-on-one attention where someone could really tell you that this is what your game's really like and this is what you should do and be moldable in terms of what your abilities are and whatnot. I would definitely always look at what you do well. Like, for me personally, I was more of a natural net player, so to speak, and I was quick and, I would go back and be a counterpuncher, but I wasn't fully developed as a junior to have someone just say, look, you got to just go to the net and be able to get to the net and develop. But your style is more catered to getting to the net, taking balls a little bit earlier and shortening the points and use your hands to be able to control the point and put pressure on your opponent. So on an early, for guys that are, playing juniors, let's say, or even adults and that are getting into the game a little more, I would definitely say, look at what your strengths are, right? And everybody has a strength, whether it's a forehand, whether it's a backhand, whether it's a serve. I'm talking about competitive players. They have something that they rely on and that they go to, and you can develop those over time as well, right? But from an early age, I'm pretty sure, like you look at Nadal, you could probably Google or YouTube 16 or something, 15, even younger. He's sitting there ripping forehands. You could see this on YouTube, right? So you can definitely see that his natural ability to hit the forehand was huge. Like he was going for it in terms of being brave, and whether it be Uncle Tony telling him to hit it, he was developing that certain shot where I'm sure I heard from other players at beginning when he came on tour, his backhand wasn't very solid, but now, that his forehand was so deadly that he was winning all his points running around his forehand. Over time, he developed and he got it better, and then his backhand got better and his serve, everything got better. But in terms of looking at the highest levels, you want to overall round off your game. Like we all want to play like Federer, right? You want to be able to chip and come to the net and be able to slice and be able to come around the ball and drive your backhand and hit a big forehand and have flawless footwork. But I think looking at what you do well specifically and really molding the game around that will give you more benefit than going into matches and then trying to develop your game around that will give you a lot more confidence. I wish I did that earlier, and I learned that later. Kind of had to suffer through it and take a bunch of losses. Learn what your strengths are earlier than later, and try to mold your game around that. And then obviously other things are going to get better as well, right? It's just those things are going to cater to your strengths. And that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I was actually on a webinar yesterday with Craig O'Shaughnessy, who was a strategist for Novak Djokovic, and he was just saying like you just gotta hit more forehands because I mean that's the weapon for most people, and it's just percentage wise when they analyze the points, like the more you hit forehands, the more you're winning the points. So definitely focusing on your strengths and just pitting that against opponents' weaknesses is the way to go for sure. So Jibran, as far as like your professional experience on the pro tour, I think in reading some of your background, you started kind of late. So I was wondering if you could just walk me through like when you started on the tour, and also really interestingly, just the experience of it all.
Yeah, no. So basically, after college, I kind of put a break on tennis for a bit just to kind of help out the family in terms of financial situation. So I was coaching quite a bit, but I still love the game, and I would try to train. And still playing slash coaching was a tough time. But then playing opens on the weekends here in Canada, and then also having those long gaps of winter, sometimes playing, sometimes not. I had some opportunities to play the futures here in Canada and Toronto a couple of years in a row. My thing was, can't really say full on that I was on tour. I was definitely trying to get some ATP points. So basically my first points I picked up were in Toronto playing local. There was 3 tournaments here in Toronto. And I think it was the last event in Toronto. There was 3 weeks in a row that I qualied, and then I ended up picking my first point up, which was incredibly tough. Like, I mean, guys, that are out there that have been on, that are listening to this too, and that have been out there, and just getting your first ATP point is such a grind, and it's so tough because there's so many great players out there, and they're all trying to aspire to the same goals, trying to make it in terms of their rankings and trying to get up there. And it was tough. It was tough, but it was a great experience. You really had to. I took so many losses in qualies, and you get to the last round of qualies, you qualify, and then you lose first round because you run into a good seed that's ranked pretty high and experienced players. But again, I look at all of that. I tell my players that I've taken more losses than wins in my career. Right? They think I'm this guy that's won all these matches, and it's just been a winning percentage. But it's definitely been way more losses than wins. But again, those losses have really developed and molded who I was as a tennis player, and I improved through that because that's how I learned, right? I mean, took the failures, and then the failures turned eventually, getting back out, putting the work in, and the failures turned into a little bit of success. So in terms of the getting my first ATP point, and that was such a relief. And it's tough. It's tough out there. People think the ATP tour is such extravagant life, and the guys on the top, obviously, the guys that are in the top 50, top 100, even top 50, like guys that are making it to Masters, and those guys are a little more settled into having a little more, say in terms of them making their, more flexibility in making money, and also being out there with, having a little bit of red carpet treatment at these tournaments, getting free food and stay and all that, but they deserve it. They put in the grind, and they went through this. Everybody has to go through the same channel and go up and grind it through the amateurs in terms of the satellites and futures and challengers tour. But yeah, you know what? I remember we would rent rooms, and there'd be times where 3 or 4 guys would be staying in one room. I remember, honestly, this is a real story. We were like sleeping in the bathtub one day because we didn't have beds to share. So because we're trying to save our money for the next week, right? Because if let's say you lose first round, the winner of the tournament in a futures event is going to get like $1,500. Like that's barely covering your costs for a ticket, or if you're flying somewhere else. It's a grind out there. And then if you lose, you're out there just training to get ready for the next week, and you're out there by yourself. It's tough. I mean, the cool thing about the traveling part, at least, is you meet new friends and players that are out there that are trying to do the same thing as you. So you make lifetime friends that I still am in touch with, and we share stories. I remember that this tournament, we had this little fun thing. And so, the memories are always going to be there, but I think the experience of just being out there and being able to taste what it was like in terms of the grind of the tour. It's a very difficult thing. So you have hats off to the guys that are on the top for them to do it day in, day out, week in, week out, to put in the practices and to put in the to persevere and to really have the discipline to be the best in the world. It's unbelievable. Those guys are that good.
Yeah, it's really some amazing insights there. You talk about learning more about yourself, especially after matches. Can you remember one particular tough loss that you had, and then I guess afterwards, something that you were able to identify that you needed to improve in your game? It could be any area. And if you could just share that with us, I think that would be interesting.
So basically, I remember one match critically the year after I'd won my first point. I was trying to. So what you have to do on the tour, for the guys that don't know how it works, is you have to basically get the same points or better to keep your ranking on the tour, right? So if I had one ATP point, and let's say I was ranked 1,500 or 1,200 in the world, I want to try to keep my 1 point, or else I'm going to lose my ranking the next year. So I remember it was the last tournament of the year, because again, I was maybe playing 3 to 4 tournaments a year because I was still working and trying to pay the mortgage and, support family, and then, wait for my 3 tournaments in the year here and locally, because I wasn't able to get out and actually travel the globe full on and play all the satellites and stuff. But I played this match, last round of qualies, to try to get into the main draw, and I was in the lead. I was up a set, and I was up 5-2, and I let my foot off the pedal just a little bit. I relaxed mentally, and I almost thought to myself, you know what, that's it. Like, I wasn't thinking in the moment. I started thinking, whoa, I got this match. And next thing you know, the guy gets a little bit of momentum. He gets back into the match. It's 5-2, 5-2, 5-3, 5-4. Now I'm getting a little tighter. He's getting looser. And next thing you know, he wins the set 7-5. Didn't win a game after that. Then he's getting confident. And third set, I still wasn't able to turn it on in terms of and we all know as tennis players, people that have competed, they know a match can turn around just like that. And so mentally, I definitely let that set go. And then third set, I tried to battle, and it went back and forth, and I lost that set 6-4, but it was tough to get it back. But then I looked back at that match and I said, you know what? And there's been thousands of matches like that, but that one's really hurt because it was really, it was the one that I could have possibly kept my ranking on, because I lost my ranking the next year because of that. So I ended up losing that match, and then I thought to myself, went back to the drawing board. It hurt. Like, obviously those kind of losses hurt. Any loss hurts. No one wants to really lose, but going back to the drawing board, I definitely was thinking about how I could have just kept the mentality of staying in the moment versus being distracted by the future, or being distracted by other things. Whether it be the sun, or whether it be the other person's crew is cheering against you, and all those things matter. And the cool thing about these stories is that I can share these stories with juniors and my players that I can relate. Like, if you just lost that tough match, hey, what was going on, and how you can learn from it, because every loss or a win, and whether they're winning, I'm still going to ask them a lot of the same questions in terms of how did you play. What were you thinking? What could you do better? So I really had to go back to the drawing board on that one, more so mentally than tactically. I mean, tactically, I could have done some things, but I mentally let that match go in terms of what my task was. And my task initially was to really, move the guy around and, again, get to the net, because it was indoor tennis. And when I was putting a lot of pressure on him with my serve and first shots, after that, whether it be serve +1 or return +1, my goal was to really take away time from the guy, because he was a solid baseliner, and I didn't want to get into rallies with him and take time away from him, because it was a faster court, and I started playing his game in the third set. So that's what lost me the match, but also is more up here, which we realize as tennis players that the mental game of tennis is definitely a huge thing that plays a big role.
Yeah, 100% there. Thanks for sharing that experience. And speaking of experiences, you've played in Davis Cup for Pakistan, and I was wondering to ask you, how that opportunity came about, and then we'll get into some other questions.
So that was an interesting story as well. I was actually visiting Pakistan, and we were there actually more so for an uncle. He was not well, so we wanted to kind of say hello and see how he was doing. And I hadn't visited Pakistan for a long time, and I was actually in training mode, so I was in shape. And what happened was, while we were there for a few months. I got invited to a tournament, a local like open event, and I ended up doing quite well in it. And then I got invited to trials, which they're like, hey, you know what? Trials are happening for Davis Cup. Do you want to try out? Because we're looking for players to add to the squad. And I was just kind of like, whoa, this is pretty cool. I mean, luckily, I was actually for that situation, I was in town because they're locally in Islamabad they had the trials. So then I tried out. It was a tough tryout because there was six guys, six of the top Pakistani players. We had to do a round robin every day for 6 days. And we had to play best of 3 out of 5 sets on clay. So you can imagine the grind, and then the weather there at that time. In general, most of the year it's quite hot, but we're talking like 40 degrees Canadian, and probably over, what was that, like over close to 100? No, I mean, like, what's that, 90 something? It was hot. But I think because I was in shape and I remember I was probably in the best physical shape of my life. That really got me through it, because I wasn't really in tennis shape, so to speak. But then I think my physicality got me through those round robin matches. And one story was like the very last match. It was a make it or break it type of situation. If I won the match, I was on the team. And if I lost, the other guy was on the team. So wow. A lot of pressure, but actually that was a cool story to share. That we played first 2 sets. I actually ended up losing. So because it was best of 5, I lost the first 2 sets. I was actually, because it was clay, you can't really get into the net as much. And I was trying to kind of out hit the guy and shorten points from the baseline. And the guy was actually really good with just taking pace and putting the balls into the corners and making me run. So he won the first 2 sets, and I was like, oh man. So now I'm looking up a mountain thinking like, okay, this is going to be a tough grind to battle this out. And so what I started to do, this was a random thing where, I was moved side to side, and I threw a ball up high to him, kind of a moon ball type of ball, like 20 feet in the air, kind of a rising ball above the guy's shoulder. And the guy hits a short ball, like right in the service box, a ball fed into the service box. And I step in, take the ball early and get into the net and put the ball away on a volley. And then, okay, try it again. I'm like, all right, let's put it up and give him another high ball above the shoulder. So the guy, and I couldn't figure this out for the first 2 sets because I was trying to out hit him, and he just loved balls right in his waist height. And so anyways, the guy couldn't hit anything over his shoulder.
Wow.
So then I mixed it up. I just went high, heavy, I mixed up the pace. I went slower, higher balls. Next thing you know, he starts dumping balls in the service line again. And then I exploited that play, and I won the 3rd set. Then I won the 4th set. Now we're in the 5th. And this is getting to the 6th day of round robin matches where both of us have been just spent with a couple of matches that were 5 sets before that, right? And getting accustomed to the weather. And so anyway, because of the mixing up of play, high ball by the 5th set, I was slicing a bit. I was changing up the pace with like a hard ball. Then I'd throw in a high ball, so not to just, give him only high balls. Eventually he could start grooving on him. Then I mixed it up, and then he actually started cramping at 2-all in the 5th set. He had to take a timeout, and then anyways, finally ended up grinding that match out. It was like 6-3 in the 5th set, and I was just like, I was just laying there on the clay, like after the match, just like, what just happened? Yeah. And that was a really, really cool experience for me, because then having the check mark on you're on the team now. And then 2 weeks after that, we were in Iran actually to play our first Davis Cup tie, which was at that time we were in Group 3. And so and then I got to meet Assam Qureshi, who's a great doubles player and a singles player. He got to top 100 in singles as well, and then he started focusing more on doubles. And a great guy, great teammate. And so he came in for, again, 2 weeks after trials. We had a Davis Cup practice with the team, the guys that were on the team. So Assam Qureshi came, and then we had a practice and got to meet them. And it was just I wasn't expected. Again, I was just there in Pakistan to really just meet family and friends. And then next thing you know, in a few weeks later, I'm on a flight to go to Iran to play my first Davis Cup tie. Like it was a dream come true, really. Right. So I guess it happened at the right time. And so we went to Iran to play our first Davis Cup tie. At that time, being in Group 3, the setup was actually, you had like eight or 10 teams from that. We were in the Asia Pacific, zone of play, and they had a bunch of teams like Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Iran, Syria, a bunch of other teams that were there that were kind of doing a round robin play. And then we ended up we actually won the tournament. So we played Iran in the semifinals, I remember. So we were in Tehran, the capital. They have a great facility there because, I mean, they had it set up back then. They had it set up in the 70s, I think, with the Shah. Yeah. And he had some, the main facility in terms of the sports facility, unbelievable. And we were blown away because, you hear stories that obviously on media saying, the country was modern, very modern country. They had a setup in place at the club that was just top notch. We had security for each team, that. This facility was unbelievable. They had clay courts, red clay, but they had like little mini stadiums for each court. It was awesome. And then they had a main stadium court as well as soccer facilities. So their sport facility was unbelievable. But that's where we played, and beautiful scenery as well. We had a big mountain in the back. So it was a great experience. And so we played Iran in the semis, and then who did we play in the finals? I think we beat Sri Lanka in the finals of that event, which moved us on to Group 2 for the next year. So that was first time, and I was playing doubles specifically with my teammate Asim Shafiq at that time, and Qureshi was playing mostly singles, and then he would play doubles with his partner Akil Khan, who's a good player as well. So no, I mean, and I was in the round robins, and we went 4-0, which was amazing. To go out and for the first time being able to win your first four matches in Davis Cup against some of these other teams, it was just unbelievable. Couldn't ask for more. It was a dream come true. And again, it wasn't planned. Like I'm going to try out. I'm going to go aspire to play Davis Cup. It was just a neat story to be able to do that. So and then the following year we played Philippines in a tie and in Manila. And we played against Akil Khan, and I played doubles, and we played against Cecile Mamet. I don't know if you remember Cecile. He was top 60. He was top 60 ATP, and then Conrad Huey.
That's my buddy. Yeah. Podcast too. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So so at that time, I didn't know who Conrad was. But then he ended up becoming a really good double specialist. He got, what was his ranking at one point? He got up there, right?
Yeah, really high, top 20 maybe.
Yeah, so
maybe higher. Yeah.
So we lost straight sets to those guys, but it was an awesome experience being away and then playing an away match in Manila. Visiting Manila, and during that time it was monsoon weather too. So we were kind of in an indoor. It was honestly the most humid place I've ever played and been in. After every practice, we'd be, I remember back then we didn't have the whole media thing, but, we'd be drenching our socks and in our shirts, and after practice, and like just water would be just pouring out of our clothes and stuff. That's how humid it was. But we played away there, and then playing away, obviously dealing with the crowd's against you. And it kind of reminded us of a little bit of college tennis. In college tennis, obviously you get guys from the other team talking you up and talking some smack, like you're not good, you suck, and you can't play, trying to get into your head a little bit. And initially, And you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
You
totally.
played college tennis. I remember a group of guys would stand right behind you in the fence. They, when no one's around, just talking smack, like, while you're picking up a ball to go serve again, they're just trying to get into your head so you can, lose to their teammate, right? But you learn as you go that you got to learn how to block that stuff out, and that's part of the grind and the suffering that you go through of competition. You have to learn how to block those things out and focus on what your tasks ahead are in the match, and that part was cool too, to be away in Manila, and it was a nice crowd. They weren't getting rowdy like you hear some stories in South America, people throwing chairs and stuff at some of these players, but it was really cool experience. We ended up losing that tie to them. We didn't have Assam, unfortunately. He was actually playing a big ATP event that he couldn't get out of to play. He was still in a tournament, so you couldn't get out of it to play a Davis Cup event. So unfortunately, last minute we had to change up the lineups a bit and play up a little bit. And so the experience, but I can't take that experience away. It was awesome. We were playing against some legendary players with Cecile and then Conrad being an awesome doubles player in the future. So great experience. It was awesome.
Very cool. Well, as a half Iranian, half Filipino, it's particularly nice to hear about those.
That's
stories.
awesome, man. Yeah. Wow. That's what's the chances of that? So
yeah, that's really sick.
That is really cool. So yeah, no, it was awesome. And also, visiting these again, tennis, I would say the experiences and the opportunities you get to see different places as well. I can never take that back. You see different communities, you see different lifestyles. I remember even in Pakistan, my home country, I was born there. So the cool thing about it, I look back at it now, my parents were living in Canada. They were visiting Pakistan and I was born there. And then they came back when I was like maybe 6 or 7 months old. And I always thought about that. And we have dual citizenship in terms of Canadian and Pakistani. And I was like, man, like, so why do I have this Pakistani passport? And then, I wouldn't have played Davis Cup if I didn't have my Pakistani passport, right? Wasn't going to be able to do that. So everything kind of works out. But also, seeing those third world countries, the tough circumstances that people live in terms of poverty. And it really, again, it opens your eyes up to the fact that we have it pretty good here in the West. And there's a lot of people out there that are suffering, but then the opportunities that I've gotten to be able to play and get experiences under the belt, very grateful for those opportunities, and wouldn't take it back for anything. So
100%. Yeah. Just being able to represent your country. I'm sure you felt really proud about that. And yeah, when you talked about like heckling, I remember one time in Cornell, we were playing a Cornell Invitational tournament, and some guy was saying, "My grandmother plays better than you," like when I was picking up the ball. So I'm sure you got much worse, but I thought that was funny.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you've had some really great memories. I was searching your Instagram to be fully transparent to see, what was going on in the past as well. And you had a lot of really great practices with some people I wrote down here, like Novak Djokovic, Brian Brothers, Tsitsipas, Shapovalov, Canadian, of course. I think you played a match with him. So I was curious to ask you in particular about Djokovic, maybe just some observations that you had when you actually practiced with him, or any particular routines or anything like that you could kind of give us a peek into.
Again, with that opportunity, I was here playing when I was training and playing out of an academy here in Tennis Canada. Basically, it was called Players Edge, and Tennis Canada was giving us the courts to use. I was at that time when I was playing / coaching, I was working with performance players here. At that time, much younger, Braden Schnurr, who's now on tour and doing quite well, and Carol Zhao, who's on the WTA tour. I'd be hitting with them like daily, which was really good, because then it kind of got me to I wasn't just feeding balls. I was able to train with them, which helped me play and then kind of get noticed by Tennis Canada. And also, so they gave me the opportunity to get in there while the Rogers Cup would happen. They invited me to be a hitting partner, which was a really, really cool experience. And, I thank Tennis Canada for that. And it was cool because you really get to see what it's all about. Like when we see the players, we get to watch them on TV, and we just see the performance on TV. But when you see these guys, whether it's warming up behind closed doors, whether it's preparing for a match, like in terms of what they do in their practices. Just their discipline and what they do on and off the court is unbelievable. It's mind-boggling in terms of preparation. Djokovic, you watch him, he warms up properly with like a half an hour, 45-minute dynamic warm up, that he does. And then he gets his body, loosened up to hit his first ball on the practice court. And again, this is really important feedback to learn for all of us, especially, juniors and adult players that play now. We're trying to bring it in to every one of my programs at work as well, to say, guys, we got to try to warm up properly to get ready to hit our first ball instead of just going out there cold. So Djokovic, unbelievable flexibility. I remember my first hit with him. It was unbelievable. We were on center court at the Rogers Cup, and he came in. He was already warmed up in terms of physical warm up, and then he got on court and he was doing extra stretches. His flexibility, we all know, is unbelievable. He had his leg up on one of his trainers' shoulders. His legs like all the way up here, and he's doing his elastic band exercises as well, and their discipline is unbelievable on court. But the hit was really, really cool. You'd think the guys would blow you off the court or something, but they know how to give you rhythm. And I'm a nobody to him in general in the broad spectrum of ATP Tour players, but they know how to give players rhythm, whether it be a hitting partner, whether it be another guy on tour. We started off playing mini tennis, really. I mean, like, we hit minis for a few minutes, and a lot of guys think, minis is like, oh, we shouldn't be hitting minis. Let's just go straight back. Djokovic was hitting mini tennis, right? Just to warm up the hands and to warm up the little mini turns and the setup and the feet. And then we gradually started moving back to 3/4 court, and then all the way back to full court. And then 5-10 minutes in, then you start grooving, it gets looser. I get looser, I get a little more comfortable. Obviously, I was like tight in the beginning, and I actually had a good like 30 to 45-minute hit before, going out to practice with Djokovic, because I wanted to be loose. I didn't want to be tight. So I remember, I told my coach, he was really excited, and he fed me balls literally for like 45 minutes going on before I hit with Djokovic. I was almost like tired before getting on. So, but I wanted to make sure I was loosened up and not tight, so I give him a good hit. But yeah, no, they give you a good rhythm, which is important for our programs too. You see some players can give you rhythm, and some players start blasting right away, and then the timing of the back and forth can be lost. But the ATP guys know exactly how to give you rhythm and timing, and then you build up confidence as well. And then once they hit 3 or 4 balls through the middle, then they hit one into the corner, right? Just to loosen up and feel their real shot, right? That we, average Joes can't handle. So, but no, it was an awesome experience. He takes the ball unbelievably early. Once he started loosening up, I mean, there's some video footage on Instagram, some small clips and stuff of us hitting, but he takes the ball right off the baseline. Unbelievable, compact swings, but just, I totally understand how he's number one in the world, and he hits the ball so deep in the court. And there's times where you just feel like you can't breathe because he just takes so much time away from you. When he started really getting looser 30, 40 minutes in, then you really realize the pace and the depth, consistent pace and depth that he's hitting with ease, relative ease, and the setup and the preparation is it's unbelievable. So that we can all learn from.
Amazing stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, how much, as you mentioned, discipline these players have, that they're like 2 hours or whatever amount of time that they're preparing before they even like step out on the court, with a dynamic warm up and then the actual warm up with you, and then other stuff probably. So really, really amazing. Curious about how you feel, because sometimes I think about this with practice partners when they play with amazing players at pro tournaments and help warm them up. I've talked to other practice partners for the City Open too. And so what's the feeling for you mentally? You mentioned you were a little bit tight. Did the practice beforehand help you get a little bit less nervous? Like, what was the nerve level for you as well?
Well, initially, the first year that I did it, I was quite nervous, and I actually started doing it more so with the WTA. So I got invited once with the ladies, and it was interesting. With the ladies, it was a little more restricted because the ladies hit a little flatter through the court, so they don't want you to hit with too much spin. So I remember, who was it? Petrova. So I hit with Nadia Petrova a couple of years back, right? And interesting story. We're hitting, and her coach at that time, I totally forget his name, but anyways, we had met on tour in the past, and he just got hired by her to be her coach. And we're hitting, and I'm hitting normally, like, because it was my first hit on the tour, on the WTA tour, practice partner thing, and the coach comes over after a few minutes, and he's like, she wants you to hit with less spin, just hit a little bit flatter, please. So then guys hit a little more spin. They hit heavy, a little higher over the net and stuff in general. So I started kind of going a bit flatter. So I'm changing my stroke all of a sudden, and I start shanking balls, and I start missing. And next thing you know, like, it's not as consistent of a hit for her because I'm shanking some balls because I'm having to change my stroke. And next thing you know, she calls him over again, and after about half an hour of hitting again, and she was maybe in a bad mood or whatever, she's like, she just wants me to feed her balls and stuff. So she didn't even say thank you or nothing, but it was a tough one. After that, and look, I mean, and the ladies are great. A lot of the ladies are awesome. That one for me, that personal experience was like, okay, this was tough. And just in general, trying to change your stroke and stuff. So I kind of got put off by that a bit in terms of changing your stroke is going to be tough. So once the guys came around, I started doing a little more with the guys. And so then I got the experience of hitting with guys like Djokovic, Nishikori, Del Potro, Tsonga, Federer, actually at Wimbledon once, which was an unbelievable story as well, because I was training in UK for a few years. So not a few years, sorry, a few months. I was visiting UK, and a friend of mine actually sent me out there for a month or so. His son was coaching out there. Playing out there. So it was a place called Bisham Abbey Sports Centre in UK. It's just about 45 minutes outside of London. And so there's this academy called Win Tennis. And I was training there a lot of the UK juniors and like some of the top juniors in the world, and guys that were on tour were competing there as an academy. So I was training there for a few months, and I was like, this guy is just working really, really hard, because I got this opportunity for the first time in my life to actually train somewhere where it was taken care of, right? Which was awesome. A friend of mine sponsored that trip out there, and I got a chance to be like, wow, I can actually train with not having the restriction of I can only do this twice a week, or so it was a full on go and train and work hard, right? That's all we care about. So I worked really, really hard at that time. And this was like 2007, actually. This was actually before this is interesting, because this is why I was in shape for my Davis Cup, which was in 2008 and 9. So I was in peak performance shape in terms of my fitness, and because I was training literally, we'd wake up, first do our fitness session, a little bit of a fitness session, a couple of days a week. And then I was playing easily 4 hours, 6 hours. We were playing 4 to 6 hours a day with fitness involved as well at this academy, right? 2 hours of training in the morning, and then match play in the afternoon for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then we do fitness at the end of the day, which was led by an ex special ops guy from UK, he was working us hard. So I was really in peak performance shape with physically, also mentally, with playing matches and playing some of the top guys in the UK at that time too, like Will, what's his name, man? My brain just shut off there. Who's a gentleman that played? He's a buddy of mine too. Will. He played Federer. He qualified. It was a great story. He ended up playing Fed first round. He qualified in Wimbledon. He's from UK.
I remember that.
My mind just shut off. Anyways, his name's Will. Will. He'll come back to me. But he trained there at that time. He was a junior, and like Neil Poffley, some of these guys that were there. So anyways, I was working so hard that Martina Hingis's agent was actually a member at that club, and she was looking for someone to hit with Martina at Wimbledon. So surprisingly, the coaches at the club approached me, and they're like, "Do you want to hit with? You want to be Martina Hingis's practice partner at Wimbledon?" And I was like, I remember I was running on the treadmill, and the guy came up to me. He's like, "You want to go to Wimbledon?" I was like, "Are you joking me? Like, this is, of course, it's going to be an unbelievable experience." So So that the week after I was on the train to go to London, and we were at the All England club, right, which was unbelievable. That's like a lifetime dream to actually play there on tour, but that didn't happen unfortunately because I wasn't good enough. But but I got a chance to be on. You watch the TV all the time, and you see like the gates at All England Club, and I walk through the gates, and then you're there with Martina Hingis, who is a famer and an unbelievable tennis player. And the very first day we got out to practice on the courts, and the practice courts at that time, a week before the event, are just unbelievably beautiful, green, lush courts. They're not at all messed from the baseline or anything, right? Or you see 2 weeks in, and the court's pretty bashed up.
Yeah.
But Federer's practicing right next to us with some junior, right? And I was just blown away. This is the first time I ever seen Federer live, and this was 2007 Wimbledon we're talking about now. And that was the year he ended up beating Nadal, which he started getting closer and closer. You could see Nadal was like, he lost in the fourth or the fifth set. I can't remember. I think it was 4 sets. And Federer took the title. And then the following year in 2008, that was a big match that, Nadal ended up taking Federer out. But anyway, so Federer was there, and obviously Hingis being Swiss as well, she introduced me to Federer, and I was like, I was just so nervous, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Because I was starstruck. That was the first time I was actually exposed. This was all before Rogers Cup hits and everything back in 2007 when I was exposed to these top players. You look down the court, you see Safin, you see Gonzalez, you see these sick names and unbelievable tennis players, and I was just like in La La Land, right? I was like, what's going on here? Like, I wasn't expected to be here, and now I'm here and I'm talking to Federer. And so he was looking for a hit the next day because he couldn't find a hit because early on in the week and guys weren't there yet fully, and other guys were. So she asked me, she's like, do you want to hit with him? And I'm like, I was just like in awe, and I was like, are you joking me? Like, what's going on here? So the day after, I ended up getting out on the grass courts at Wimbledon with Fed. It was just unbelievable, right? So playing on grass with him, and that experience was unbelievable because he's such a genuine guy. He's such a nice guy. And the grass, if guys that haven't played on grass, the bounce actually bounces a little bit lower. So, but again, he was really, really comforting in terms of not making me feel nervous and giving you, rhythm and timing. And he's actually way more relaxed than other guys when he's practicing. If you've watched him practice and on YouTube, like, he's just very, very relaxed, and he can give you a lot of easy rhythm and timing to deal with. And then, he'll kind of hit a big one into the corner and change up pace and whatnot. But these guys know how to build up the pace, so to speak, right? So that was an unbelievable experience that I never imagined that was going to happen. So that was cool. And then that whole week I had trained with Hingis as well, getting her ready for the tournament. She was coming back from injury at that time, I think from a hip injury, and she was in and out of maybe playing or maybe not. So she played a couple rounds and she lost, I think, early. But again, that was a great experience. It was just right place at the right time, and who would have thought that was going to happen? And watching matches at All England Club was just unbelievable. Live matches. Never would have thought I was going to be able to go there. So that was cool.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And yeah, it was Marcus Willis, I think, is who we were.
Marcus Willis, sorry. He's going to kill me for that because I talk to him all the time. My mind went blank. Marcus, sorry, buddy.
Don't worry. Marcus, I've been asking Jibran questions for over an hour here, and it's excusable. But so in terms of Federer, any contrast? Well, I guess you mentioned, seemed like, I guess Federer might have been a little looser. Was any other contrasts that you can see between him and Djokovic when you were actually on court?
So they all have different ways of how they approach it in terms of their and the cool thing about these top guys like Nadal, Fed, and Djokovic, they're kind of ghosts, so to speak. When you're out there, because I get like this all pass, this pass to get behind into the lockers, and also into the where the guys train and the gyms and stuff, and where they're hanging out, the players lounge and stuff, just to get an idea of what these guys are really doing and what the atmosphere is like. But these guys come in, they're ghosts. You see them for a few minutes and then they're gone. They go into they almost have like their own setup, their own private rooms set up through whatever the ATP or whatever that they want to be kind of on their own with their teams to prepare, right? They're not out in the open as much as the other guys are, whether it's because they just feel comfortable doing their own thing or whether they want to hide their secret recipes behind closed doors. But it's pretty cool. You see the guys warm up and stuff, but those guys, so to speak, they come and then you see them and then they leave, they disappear. And then you see them again for a little bit. And then they and obviously they're busy guys too. They're doing post and pre interviews and, obviously they have so much going on, but they are definitely on another focus level than the other guys from what I saw, right? They have blinders on. They come in and they don't really mingle as much with the other guys, especially when they're in tournament mode. Whereas, the other guys could be, Monfils is like playing table tennis with some guys or and they're all, obviously they're all focused tennis players. But the cool thing about the guys is that they're all week in, week out. They're chilling with each other. Every week they see each other, right? So they really are enjoying being around each other, which is really cool to see, or else the environment would be a little bit tough, right, to deal with. So they're playing pool if they're out. I remember watching like Milos Raonic play pool with like Fognini. And so those guys are on their downtime. I remember one year I was at the Rogers Cup and Olympics was going on, I think the week before during that same kind of time, and the tennis was over, but the track and field was still going on. So all the players, it was a rain delay, and we're all like, there was about 15, 20 guys, there from the top 15 that were just sitting around, huddled around a TV watching Usain Bolt's like world record race when he was about to run the 100-meter dash, right? And it was unbelievable. Like, it was just like, and I find that's really cool too, when other sportsmen are actually watching other unbelievable sportsmen, and supporting other sportsmen on TV and really watching, whether it be basketball or whether it be, watching Usain Bolt's track and field run. That was a cool experience. And, but yeah, no, those guys have blinders on, and the top guys definitely are at another focus level, and they're really disciplined. I remember a year where Murray ended up beating Djokovic in Montreal. I was there, and you could see that year Nadal was kind of, when we had, I can't remember the year. I think it was 2013 or 12. But anyways, Murray ended up beating Djokovic in the finals. It was a really good match, actually, the Montreal Masters finals. If you guys look that up on YouTube, it was a tight 3-set battle. And that whole week, you could see Murray was on another level of focus. He was training hard. He was putting in that extra little bit after practice, on the court. His discipline level with his warm-up routines, and after match being on the bike and then getting stretched out and then being on the massage tables. And so you could just see he had blinders on, and that's when he really was playing quite well. And Nadal was kind of he was taking that 1 year break there, where whether he was injured or whatnot, but you could see Nadal for the first time was sitting around watching golf for like that tournament. I remember now, and you never see that from guys like that, right? So he was watching golf. He was playing some video games. And again, these guys need some time off. You look at their schedules, it's unbelievable. And that's why hats off to especially these top 3-4 guys that they've been doing it for so long. And to be able to do it week in, week out for so many years, you'd think, you scratch your head, like, how do these guys not take time off? And I get it, right? Nadal was probably just taking a little bit of a breather that year in terms of his focus. You could definitely see it. And I think he lost to like Nishikori or something that year, but he was just a little more reserved and chilled out in terms of his focus. But you could see the people the players that were focused and not as, I'm going to just chill out and hang out with my buddies and the stuff, were really doing well. You could see that, and that can learn from that as tennis players.
Yeah, 100%. That's super cool stuff there. As far as your experience with the Bryan brothers, like, was totally different, where you were just like doing a bunch of like volleying and stuff like that? And how were they as well?
So with the Bryans, it was really cool. Those guys are awesome guys, really nice guys. And I got introduced to them as well they were looking for a guy to actually serve to Bob Bryan, because he's a lefty, right? So actually to Mike, sorry. Because Mike's righty, and then Bob, they always usually, like, as doubles guys, especially with the Bryans, because they're brothers, they always just usually train with each other. But they needed an extra guy that day, specifically with the first time I actually got onto court with them. And they needed a guy to serve to Mike, a righty to serve to Mike, to get ready for their next match. So I got on court, and they were hitting, and they literally just, for the first time, they wanted me to be there just to serve to Mike for the last, 20, 30 minutes. And that was the first time I got introduced to them. And then we actually, after that, they wanted to play some points. So then, their coach, and he played on one side with Mike, and then I played with Bob. And then we kind of hit it off. Like, Bob and I actually, at that time, Bob had his first kid, and then I was talking about my first kid, and
cool.
We kind of hit it off. We became friends, and, we exchanged numbers, which was cool. And So we still keep in touch and stuff. And so, but the cool thing with them was that the doubles dynamic is a little bit different because they can train with each other, right? But when they want to play points, they have to have two other guys. But they then we played points after that. There's actually a clip on YouTube, which was posted up by someone else. I'll put it up and put a little clip up of that. And we were playing some points with the Bryans, which is amazing. I mean, those guys are the most successful doubles team of all time. Gentlemen's, really nice guys, easy to deal with too, and unbelievable hands, unbelievable, again, work ethic. They were out in terms of doubles. I remember their work ethic. And then over the years, every year they would call me out. So every year there was a time too where I was literally there just for them. Like, they were like, hey, we want Jibran. Is Jibran here this year? You want Jibran?
Sweet.
So for a bunch of years, I was kind of there, and then I'd be, sitting in their box and kind of cheering them on. They won a bunch of titles. I remember in Toronto and in Montreal, and they invited me to come up to Montreal because usually I just do it in Toronto in terms of the hitting. And then when I go to Montreal, it's more so because a player will invite me, whether it be Assam Qureshi, who played a couple of years ago there, or Bob Bryan. And, I'll get my little pass and then I'll just kind of chill, but also watch matches and then be on their side and support them and then warm them up. And so, but it's unbelievable the work ethic they put into it, even as doubles players, the same work ethic. And they're out there, I remember 8:00 in the morning or 7:00, almost getting done at 8. So you can imagine they're out there before anybody else, getting their workout in, getting their training practice in, and then being off the court by 8 a.m. Not even playing in the next few days, right? Because the doubles and most of these tournaments start like Wednesday, Thursday, sometimes, right? Because they're smaller draws. But yeah, work ethic, again, their discipline and their work ethic is just unbelievable to learn from. Whether it be dynamic warm-ups before their warm-up for practice, right? They have to do it. They understand that they could potentially get injured and the benefits that it provides and gets them loosened up to hit their first balls on court. And afterwards as well, right after their matches, and this goes for any player, they're on the bike, they're flushing out the legs, getting the lactic acid out. Also, they're stretching for a good, 30 minutes to 40 minutes. And then they're on the, after they shower, they go down to get massage. So it's literally their whole day is put into their grind and their what they do and every day. So it's pretty amazing to watch that and learn from it. So.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I mean, they definitely are super nice. Remember one year at the City Open, I did a quick post-match interview with them, and predictably I mixed them up, but they were cool about it. I think Bob laughed, and then I realized immediately that I screwed that up. So, but they're really cool guys. One last question about practicing and playing with these amazing players. Just curious, as far as like, which one or two players did you find with like the most relaxed and chill and like super easy going, and then which one or two were super intense?
So the cool thing was too is that I was able to hit with Nadal as well, and I got that opportunity so I could say Nadal, Fed, and Djokovic were under the belt, which was great. And he brings he's unbelievably humble. All those guys are really, really humble, nice guys to deal with. They're asking about, Federer and Nadal and Djokovic, they're asking about where you train and what you do. And that really made things special because, it's like really they could not even care, but they're actually asking about where you're from, what you do, and, how things are going. And so they make you feel at ease. And then you realize after doing it a few years, in the first year, I was like shaking in my boots. And then the next couple of years, it was a lot more at ease because you get used to it, but they make you feel that way, right? So they make you feel at ease and really humble guys. Federer is just on another level of genuine, humble, very nice. I remember a friend of mine was with me once and he was asking for an autograph and he was almost doing like an interview right before. And he's like, but I'll sign your hat or whatever after I'm done. And he actually came over after and literally like wouldn't even have to go to him. We were sitting on a table and he came over and he just surprised us. He's like, I'll sign your hat now. And how's things going, and chatting with us. And it was just unbelievable, right? You're like thinking, whoa, like it's Federer, right? And then Nadal too, very nice, going through, the players' lounge, always saying hello to everybody, saying hello to, when I was on court with him too. His English at that time wasn't, very, very fluent, but he was still making me feel comfortable. How are you? How's everything? Very nice, very genuine. But once it got to practice mode, like he is he is definitely the most intense guy. You can see he just takes he's a little more specific with bringing that same intensity in practice, even more so in the practice court than in matches. And we think he's really intense in matches, but he's actually even more intense in practice. So he hits through the ball a lot in practice. And we've seen that whether it be on YouTube and stuff, but his ball definitely is the heaviest to deal with. Again, he gave me easy pace in the beginning. And then once he started loosening up in 15, 20 minutes, his ball was, if I didn't take it early, like forget it. It's gone. It's up here. It's above the shoulder, and you can't handle the spin and the pace. It's too much. Wow. So he'll go 3-4 balls up the middle, and then he'll just pop one down into the open court, right cross court or down the line, to kind of work on the natural pace that he'd be using in a match. But he was definitely the most intense, but again, very humble, very genuine. Djokovic was very nice as well, asking about, I've hit with him a couple times. This last time I hit with him too. He just recently had his second kid too. The very first time I hit with him, actually I just posted up on my Instagram the picture, which was cool. The very first time I hit with him was on center court, and we were walking on court, and he actually was just winning. He just got done winning Wimbledon that year too, and he had his first child, and I just had my first child as well. And we were walking on court, and I was like, congrats for winning Wimbledon. And I heard you're a dad now too. And he's like, yeah, it's an amazing experience. And then we started sharing a little bit of like, yeah, I'm a dad too, and this and that, which was cool. And then next thing you know, Federer is walking off the court. He was just finishing his match with his practice match and practice with Benoit Paire. So he was coming off. I got to say hello to Fed again, and we met up, and then the funny thing is, and the very cool thing is that these guys see thousands, if not millions, of people when they travel the globe, right? Whether it be players, but fans, this, that, like they see everybody, right? But he still remembered my name, and I was like, whoa, like, because I hadn't seen him since 2007, I think, at that time, in terms of meeting him. And he was like, hey, Jibran, how you doing? I was like, oh man, he still remembers Jibran. Like, I'm a nobody, right? So. But anyway, so that was really cool. And so, I mean, and that shows you how alert they are mentally. That shows you how much these guys are not only intelligent and smart, but they, that's fast thinking on court too. That tells you how they can make last minute decisions in a match and win matches for how many years now, right? So that makes them great as well. But yeah, the genuine feeling that I got from most players, honestly, the guys are all the guys are really nice. I didn't get any, I've hit with Fognini. You hear stories that Fognini can be a little bit tough to deal with on court. But even Fognini was nice. He's a nice guy on court, and he hits a great ball as well. And again, all the experiences were unbelievable. But I would definitely say Nadal was the most intense in terms of what he brings to the court and his intensity and ball striking. Unbelievable heavy balls. Federer hits a big ball too when he wants to. But he's more relaxed. He's more chilled. Like, he'll just kind of take it easy in practice and then turn it on when he wants to, and then just turn it on in a match whenever he wants with a flip of a. But again, guys that are watching, these guys have been doing it for so long that a guy like Fed can actually turn it off in practice and then be able to turn it on in a match because they've put in the grind and they've suffered from many years, right? So they're able to do that. That doesn't mean we copy that. And you still got to be disciplined and be able to be somewhat focused on what you're trying to do instead of, you have some juniors be like, hey, you know what, I'm copying Federer, I want to be relaxed like him too, but we can't be like them until we actually hopefully get to that level. We all aspire to get to that level.
100%, Jibran. Very cool. Again, amazing insights. And, when I was scanning your Instagram, I saw a really nice post about you playing against Denis Shapovalov. Probably pronounced that wrong, but and I was wondering I don't know how much you want to speak about that experience. I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, no, I think that match, even though it was an exhibition match, we held it at the Granite Club. It was a match I'll never forget because even though it was for fun, I actually lost my father the week before that match, and he was battling cancer. And this is exactly why I had to come back and cut my, college career short too, is that he was dealing with some health issues at that time. And I had to kind of take the priority to take the reins in terms of financial stability for the house and take care of my parents and take care of also a wife and a young child. So I had a lot of stuff on my shoulders to take care of. And that's why, but then I also had this goal of being a pro, right? Like, I wanted to be a pro, and and that was my goal. So that match was very special because the months leading up to that time were tough, and my father had passed away literally the week before. They had planned to do this exhibition match about a year before, so I'd already confirmed to say yes, and then I got a call like literally the week of after my dad had passed, and my boss Tim was like, "Hey, you gonna be able to do this? We could still call it off, get someone else." And I was like, you know what? My dad would have been proud because I showed him pictures. I'm going to play with Shapovalov, and at that time, so I ended up doing it. So it was great, even though I just went through a tough time with losing my father, and guests coming over to pay respects and stuff. I had to get out, and it was my getaway, right, from the tough experience that I had to deal with. But that I did it, and the crazy thing about it, and I actually tell my students and the people I coach, especially competitors, with what I went through that match, because I had gone through such an extreme experience with losing my father. I went on court almost totally free of any expectations. Like, there were members asking me, like, "Jibran, have you been training for this match?" And oh my goodness, like, this guy's gonna, I even had some guys come up to me like, "This guy's gonna destroy you. Why are you even doing this?" It's funny. My brother-in-law is like, "Dude, don't go out there. You're gonna get destroyed. You're gonna make a fool of yourself." But I wanted to get out there just because, again, I knew Dennis, number one, from the Players Edge Academy in Toronto at that time. Dennis's mother was actually a colleague of mine, so we were all coaching at the same academy. And little Dennis at like 8, 9, 10 years old would be hanging around the courts all day, and his mom would sometimes ask me to hit with him. So I knew Dennis when he was this tall. And so I kind of had this, like, and he looked up to me at that time because I was like this pro tennis player, right? So I would hit with him, and so we had this kind of comfort with each other. So I wanted to get out anyways, in general, just to get out and see something different, because the last few months before that were tough. But during the match, my bosses are there. There's a couple hundred members there that were watching, because it was during a December break time, and I went in there and just totally I had blinders on. I just enjoyed the moment. We did an 8-game pro set, right? Because it wasn't a 2 out of 3. We didn't have too much time to do it, but we did an 8-game pro set, and I could have, when I look back at it, I was in a state of mind where I could definitely say that I was so in the moment that I almost didn't even know what the score was. Like, at one point, until like the umpire's calling the score, and then you come back to life. But I was kind of numbed from like the months before, and then the week got leading up, but I was playing so free, and I was I was playing so loose, that because I had no expectations of winning and losing, and I didn't care what my boss thought, I didn't care what the members thought, if I was going to win or lose. I didn't care what anybody thought, because I had gone through something that was obviously really tough, and this was like my release. So I was just out there playing tennis and that match specifically on a competitive level, I would definitely speak to that, really left a mark in terms of not only learning experience, but something that I'll never forget, because I ended up winning the match, and the way and leading up, now coming up soon, I'll post that. Somebody surprisingly had recorded that last clip, because what happened was, we ended up getting into a tiebreaker. He was leading. He was up like 6-4. Then it was like 8-6. Wow. And then I came back, and then I tied it up, and 8-all. We played a tiebreaker, and we played a 10-point breaker. And there's a little clip of someone recording the match from like me being up, I think 5-2. Anyways, like, I was up 5-2 in the breaker, long story short, and I had blinders on up until that point. At 5-2, and this is what I tell my students all the time, right? At 5-2, leading in that match, what started coming into my mind was, oh my God, I'm about to beat this guy. And oh my goodness, what is my boss going to say? Or what is he going to think? Am I supposed to be beating this guy? What are the members going to say? So all these demons started coming back into my mind. Yeah. Whereas before, I was just totally like, I had this self-belief in myself that everything's going to be all right. Just dealt with this tough time with losing my father, and everything's fine. I had this like contentment that I was good. Like, I had this belief in that match that I was just fine. Just do whatever you learned how to do for so many years. Go out there and do it. So those things started creeping in my mind. I was up 5-2 at that time, and we're playing a 10-point breaker. Okay. I went down 6-5 from that point. I lose, I don't know how many points there. I mean, my mind's done now, but I lost 6 points in a row or something like that. And down 6-5. And then I was like, dude, let it go. And then it came to me again. And I said, who cares? Like I almost had this in the whole match. I almost had this who cares mentality. But then that who cares mentality wasn't like, I'm not tanking. It was almost this state of mind that I'm playing my game, I'm competing, but I had zero expectations of winning or losing. In the mental state or, the psychological state I was in, I could have been, in that state of like how guys say you're in peak performance stage, like you're just totally in the zone, right? I was in the zone of playing and competing because I didn't really care about if I was going to win or lose, but I was just there for the moment, every point. That's why, like at one point, I didn't even know what the score was until like the umpire would call the score out. So, and it ended up getting back and forth. It was 6-all, then 7-6, and 7-all. Then I went down match point at like what's called at 9-8. And he has a match point. Then it went back. Then I tied it. Then I'm up match point. Then he saves a match point. Then ended up winning the match. I think it was like 13-11 or something like that. And again, it was he was like about 17 or 18 at that time. And he just won Junior Wimbledon and all that stuff. But to me, he was just that little Dennis that I knew when, he was trying to ask me for hits. So that obviously gave me a comfort level too, because I knew him and in the middle of the match, like, or right before actually, we just warmed up and he's a nice guy, genuine guy too. His buddy actually, because I'd posted up on Facebook or something that my dad passed away or something. So he actually, he paid respects and he gave me a big hug and he's like, man, I really have respect for you. Dennis gave me a hug and he's like, for you to even come out and do this after losing your dad. So he had a lot of respect for me to come out and play. But, even after the match, I was, emotional as well a bit because, I wasn't expected to win the match at all. But that was, even though it meant nothing, but to me, it was a big, big experience. And then also, the members had a little more, oh, Jibran can actually play tennis. And I probably surprised my bosses too, because I bet you if they were betting for a player, majority of the people in that stadium, even though we're rooting for Jirban to do well, they had no clue that Jirban was going to be able to beat a caliber player like that. And then funny thing was, a year later, even 2 years later, he ended up beating Nadal at the Rogers Cup. And then I had members calling me and being like, "Oh my goodness, he just beat Nadal. That means you beat Nadal." And I'm like, "Yeah, right. That means I beat Nadal." But that was a really cool experience. And, again, that memory will be there for a lifetime, and that experience that I share with some of the competitors on court. Because if I look back, and even that futures kind of match that I shared with you guys just now, in terms of being in the lead and then losing, I really thought that I remember that I look back now, my mental state was, I had so much like pressure and expectation to win a match because I had to win that match to stay in the rankings. And I put so much pressure on myself that I forgot to compete with almost letting go. But that shows you how much pressure there is on some of these players. And then I'm sure the top level players have done it so much that whether it's sponsorship pressure, or whether it be being able to sustain a certain ranking, you have a lot of pressure to deal with, right? So when I played that match in the futures that I lost, being up a set and down and then up 5-2 in the second and losing in the third, I definitely put way more pressure on myself to like, I have to do this. I have to win. And then I wasn't able to compete to my full potential. But then when I almost felt that numbness / no expectations and just play your game and don't worry about the expectations in the Dennis match, even though it didn't mean anything, but I ended up winning that match, which was totally unexpected, right? So that was a huge learning experience for me and for other players. I hope that helps them when they hear this story, because sometimes we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves. I have to do this. And like, whether it be parent pressure, whether it be just like keeping a ranking or whatever it be, I can definitely relate to being on both sides of it now in terms of pressure and non-pressure, but having less expectations and going out there. And I tell my, it's tough to do when you're in competitive mode, but going out there at the end of the day, look, it's a game, it's tennis, and you want to enjoy being a competitor, and you want to enjoy the thrill of competition and being able to just being out there and being healthy. Now with these tough circumstances around us with COVID, I hope that this downtime has made people realize that, that health is number one, and these things that we take for granted, like health and the people that we love around us and our loved ones and our friends and our families are priority and first. And tennis is still just a game that we love to do and love to play. But if we just get out there and have fun more, it'll definitely make us play better tennis.
100%. I'm really happy that you compared and contrasted, the match with Shapo versus that last match. We're able to possibly get an ATP point to retain your ranking, because it really shows how when we think about our extraneous factors that we pretty much can't control, then that's really going to have a negative effect on our games versus just focusing on what we can control, which is just our execution and strategy and things like that. So really great lesson for everybody who's listening. Appreciate that. And so obviously, want to touch upon some of your great coaching that you're doing at the Granite Club with my buddy Irfan, who I was actually supposed to come up to Toronto for his wedding this year, but obviously that had to be.
Yeah, it got postponed, unfortunately. Well, hopefully we'll get to meet up because of that when we, hopefully it's going to be next year now, but, it'll give us an excuse to meet up as well. So that's great. But yeah, no, I'm really enjoying the experience now with coaching, and I'm trying to get more into, we look at this COVID time, we look at the downtime, people can bring it into the negative, or I like to take things into the positive. And
Exactly.
There's a lot of positives that came out of this time, because whether it be more family time or downtime, but specifically in my coaching career now, I've been able to, I wouldn't have got into this whole Instagram thing, right? Like, I just recently started this a few months ago, and I got inspired by guys like you and another guy, shout out to, Ryan Reedy, who you probably know as well, who does 2-minute tennis. And, he did a couple of Zoom classes on video analysis. And I always thought his stuff was really cool. His content was cool too. So I reached out to him and I did one of his Zoom classes, and I learned how to do some technical analysis, which I never really got in depth with. And I had some downtime, and because of that downtime, it inspired me to start getting into that. And I always wanted to do this, because now I had more time to do it. I was able to now start building up a little bit of content on Instagram, and I'm trying to build that up. And, you guys can follow me on JForce Tennis if you guys want on Instagram, and YouTube is the same thing, JForce Tennis. And yeah, so it's, it's getting out there and just trying to put a little bit of content out every day, whether it's video of helping someone with their simple tip on your forehand, or a simple tip on, I did one the other day on, how to serve in the sun. It's always a tough one where, people try to avoid hitting in the sun, and, this is how you hit in the sun or whatever. So small little tips that will help everybody, and not just competitive tennis players, but, any beginner player, any player that loves to play tennis. I think the goal is to try to keep it simple, so it kind of hits everybody versus just a specific genre of player. But yeah, no, it's been an amazing experience. I've been at the Granite Club for 8 years now, and it started off tough because, I was going from teaching Braden and those high performance players, and then all of a sudden settling down, and then realizing that my tennis career is over now, because I have a child now and I have to support the family a little more seriously now. And so I started doing more certifications. So I did Tennis Canada certifications here, and I got myself into that, and then started getting more into coaching. But yeah, no, I started off doing a little more, red ball stuff. And it was frustrating in the beginning. I wasn't motivated enough to do that, because I'm coming from hitting balls with former pros, this, that. And then it was a huge shock. And it is a private club. So it was a big culture shock to me too, in terms of, it was a different dynamic of player, right? So a little more club level player versus performance player. So that huge difference was a big shock to me initially. And I was a bit demotivated. I was a bit not motivated initially, because, I felt like I was doing a little more babysitting more so than actually being able to teach, just to get your feet wet. But it was good. Again, I look back at that, and I look at those times, those tough times to grow as a tennis coach. And now being able to, I've been there for 8 years, develop up a clientele and build up my coaching ability to now I'm the head of senior development at the club. So my boss, Gary Caron, and Tim Fisher, they thought it was a good idea to get me focused more on senior development, senior competitive play. And the focus usually at most clubs is get the juniors going. So we have a decent junior program. That's players that are playing competitive, locally, provincially, and nationally players. But the focus was to get, there's a huge demographic of senior adult players that had a lot of time that could focus on competitive play, whether it be, senior ITFs. I'm a senior, by the way. I'm 35 and over. But
I just became a senior too.
Hey, man, there we go. Usually the funny thing is like senior development at first, there's like some people are like senior development. That sounds like, you're walking around with a cane, but no, it's 35s and over. And there's a new world out there with competitive play within 35. It's 5-year increments of 35s, 40, 45, all the way up to like, it goes all the way up to the top, right? To like almost 80, 85s. But anyways, there's a huge demographic of player, with juniors, it's great. We want to develop them and keep developing them. But a neat thing about this is that the seniors aren't going anywhere. Like it just doesn't stop because, at 18, a junior could possibly go into university and then he's got more things to look forward to. Whereas in this cool dynamic, it's, you get to see a broad range of players and ages, but it's ranging from 35 to 100 years old, right? So there's no end to it in terms of development, which is neat. But also with the club culture, it's more internal leagues and house leagues that the players were used to. But now I'm trying to slowly integrate, hey guys, there's tournaments outside the club. Like there's tournaments that you could play ITF international sanctioned events that are in Toronto, or that you can travel to the US to go play and get your ranking up. And that people have a lot of time to focus on that, especially if their kids at that age, group, especially in the 50s and the 55s, their kids are either in university or they're independent kids. And so they do have some extra time, then they're passionate about tennis. So this is a great time to get them involved and get them understanding the full picture and being able, with my experience in the background that I've learned with, all these pros and taking that information and being able to help them with doing, I make sure with this, now I had 16 players in a group that I was running this week with men and women ranging from age 40 to 65, 70-year-olds even, right? 75 plus. That we need to do a proper dynamic warm-up. Like a lot of them, they're like, we've never done this before. So getting them introduced to why do we have to do this at first, it's like, why do we need to do this? But then you tell them like, hey, it's injury preventative. It gets you, properly warmed up. Your body's in gear to hit the first ball and you're ready to go versus coming in cold, hitting, and then taking you an hour to really actually getting loosened up in your practice and getting quality hits in. So, just getting them introduced to that. Then also now slowly I'm going to start getting them introduced to off-court training. So they need to understand that they need to work on their strength and conditioning if they want to become competitive players, but also realizing that it's really going to help them with their injury prevention, right? And then teaching them post stretches. And I love your stuff, that you're putting out there as well with the dynamic warm-ups and the stretches and the core workouts and stuff that you're showing as well. And that's all needed for every player, right? Whether it's a junior or whether it's a senior, but getting them molded into, especially with seniors, I'm 35, though actually 36 now. And, my lower back in the morning is sore too. So I get like getting old, what getting old means, right? So it's more so important for us as senior players to be doing it than juniors need to do it obviously too. But, we need to do it even more because we can get injured much quicker, right? If we do not do those things. So just getting them going and developing a little more of a competitive nature kind of theme around the club, which is nice, and a little more of a competitive program structured around that, getting players playing, and which was great. Like this before COVID, January 2020, there was 2 events, ITF events here in Toronto, where the first tournament we had about 11 players playing during holiday season. And then the second tournament in January and mid-January after the holiday season, I had 18 players play. Out of the 18, there was 15 players, honestly, that had never played a tournament in their life. They didn't even know what a tournament was, and got them going and got them actually believing the fact that they can get out and experience something special. And everybody had positive feedback. Some of them lost, but you know what? I was there watching them in their matches, and they really felt that support, but also them realizing that there's other players outside of the scope of the bubble of just the Granite Club, and meeting new players, seeing how others warm up, or, players that are experienced, that how do they win matches, and watching the tactics and learning, but also learning about themselves. And when they did take a loss, or whether they did take a win, talking to them about their tactics and what worked, what didn't work in the match. Also getting them to come back with some real, I feel like match play is really, really important to get out. It's like going to school and doing all this hard work and then not being tested, right? Not being
Yeah.
quizzed.
Yeah.
So them being able to play matches, and obviously some players are hesitant. They don't want to get out there, whether it be fear of loss or fear of whatever it be, fear of failure. I think I really had to inspire them to get out, and I actually played. I wasn't ready to play. I ended up playing at the doubles event in the 35s. We lost in the finals to Henry Choi and his partner, who Henry Choi actually is number one in the men's 35s in the world, singles player. He's a really good player. We played opens together, and he played, I don't know where he played D1 tennis as well, but he's really focusing on, he's a head pro out in Vancouver somewhere. And he's had some time to actually go out there. And so it actually got me inspired to kind of get back into competitive mode, which feeds into, I had a bunch of members come out and watch me in the finals, right? So we created a nice little a community of tennis players within even our club as a Granite team that was really able to support each other, but also, see that we can enjoy this competitive natured events outside of the club. So that's what I'm trying to build within the club, and hopefully keeps growing. So that's the goal.
Awesome, man. Great to hear that. I feel like you and Irf should get out there and play some dubs too.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to motivate Irf to get out there and do it as well. Eventually, I'm sure he's got more. He's got bigger things on his mind with getting married soon and stuff. But yeah, no, I got him helping with the program, and he's been helping me since the fall before COVID with this program too. And he's got playing background, so I wanted to bring on some guys that had some playing ability and experience from the past to be able to give feedback to the players and what it really means to be a competitor, right? So, and just sharing that with the members, I think they've really, really loved it, and so far, and the goal is to keep moving forward with it. So yeah,
awesome, man. So as far as things you've seen, probably the last question, substantively, with your members, like, is there one or two particular things that you've seen in their games that's like a running theme that you've identified that you find yourself like kind of over and over telling people like, oh, you need to change this or adjust this and so forth?
Well, it's an interesting thing at the moment. I've made it very inclusive. So in terms of level and the rating system, you'll have players ranging from 3.0 to like 4.5, right? And then you allot them on certain courts depending on ability. But I've made it in a way where it's I'm trying to get an idea, because it's just new now. I'm trying to get to see who really is aspiring to work and to suffer a little bit and feel uncomfortable and be able to get better. And everybody wants to get better, but this theme in terms of being a competitor, whether it be social play, these guys want to beat their buddies on Monday night doubles or whatever. But right now it's such an open thing in terms of really getting an idea of who wants to play and be able to play. We find that we see, it goes back to basics. A lot of these guys love to play doubles. Club level tennis they really love their doubles, and the singles, we're trying to bring in themes of singles as well. We'll do a little bit of a theme structured around singles play, and then we'll do doubles to end off the day with our 2-hour program or whatever. So we get an understanding, because there's some players that would love to play singles in their tournaments, which we had do, right? So, but a lot of the players love playing doubles, but it's the basic things, right? Where to stand. We don't get too much time specifically to work on grips or technique and this and that, but it's more based around being alert, being active, keeping intensity up, keeping quality up, preparation, setting up quickly. Why is depth so important? Why is positioning here so important? Those things are we're trying to keep it as simple as possible initially, and then you start getting deeper into the understanding of. We even did some poaching stuff leading up to before COVID. We did a bunch of poaches, where to stand and what to do in a poach, how to fake, how to stay, how to use signals, and a lot of people didn't understand signals at that time. So those kind of things, and just making them more aware, and again, I think more so importantly is building a community of tennis players within the club. So they actually love coming out and being a part of a group that is wanting to do the same thing and competing and working hard to get better.
100%, Jibran. Appreciate that. So I know you mentioned a couple places where people could reach you, but I mean, yeah, you can mention like any others, or just mention them again as far as like where people can connect with you and find your instruction and posts and all that?
Yeah, so I started the Instagram stuff, and you guys can follow me on JForce at JForce Tennis for the Instagram. And I haven't really done too much on the YouTube page yet, which I'm going to start uploading. I might upload that. Watch out, guys! I'm going to probably upload that Shapovalov experience in that tiebreaker. I think that'll be a cool experience for guys to for players and people to see. And also after this, listening to the story, I haven't really shared this with that many people in depth, but I think this will be cool for the ones to actually go and see that. And I'll put that up on my YouTube page too, which is JForce Tennis as well, so you guys can follow me there.
Sweet, awesome, Jibran. So before I let you go, I asked everybody on the podcast this question, which you've given us a lot of great tips, but what is one key tip that you can give our audience to help them improve their tennis games?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would definitely go back to the beginning. Like I think overall, it's very important to understand what you do well and realize what you do well early, and then be able to mold your game around that. Right. So whether I love big forehands, I want to see more forehands. Right. Obviously, the backhand you're going to develop as you go, but you want to structure your game around a certain way of playing, and I feel that can be kind of used for every player, whether you're a beginner, whether you're a competitive player. Learn what you do well and what you can't do, and base your game around doing those things more so often, the better things more often, like your weapons, and using the things that you do well more often than you don't do well. Like if I don't have a good backhand, that doesn't mean I don't hit a backhand, but guess what? I'm going to favor my forehand. You get around it as much as you can, right? You use your footwork, and then you develop your ability to use your footwork to get around, whether it be, I need to spend a little more time in the gym to get quicker to get around a ball so I can use my strength more. Or whether, I know I have a big serve, I'm going to work on getting a basket and putting in 15, 20, half an hour every day to develop my serve, because I know I'm going to get a lot of free points out of it. But the serve and the return in general, like you said, you talked to Craig, and, we're watching Craig a lot as well. As coaches and tennis players, he's done a lot. And first four shots, you can see how important those first four shots are. But also, we do tend to work a lot on ground strokes and volleys and other things and technique. But we tend to forget as coaches and as players that we really need to focus on our serve +1 shots and a return +1. So the serve and the return is just critical. I mean, that's where the matches are starting, and, the point starts from the serve and the return. So, just focusing more on that. But I really believe that you should try to get some guidance and start understanding what you are. Who are you on the court? What do you do well? And mold your game around your strengths. Like that's how I think you're going to build more confidence. And as you go, your technique's going to get better and better, right? Federer and Nadal and those guys, their techniques, they're still working on stuff, right? They're still getting better in technique. I believe technique gets better and better as you go and as you develop and as you get stronger. But the confidence comes from you believing what you do well, and it builds your identity. And I think a player identity is very, very important from the get-go. So the earlier you find out what you like to do, focus on that, and then plug away and just build around it, build your base from that. So that's what I would say to all the players out there, and coaches too, hopefully.
Love it. Appreciate that. Yeah, just use your moneymaker. It's like you're really good at carpentry, and that's your career, and that's your strength, and you do it a lot. So awesome, Jirban. I appreciate you coming on to the podcast, and a lot of great stuff, a lot of great experiences that you've gone through with us. So I appreciate you coming on. This was definitely a long episode, but it was filled with a lot of great stuff in there. So thanks again. And looking forward to meeting you at least by next year, and in person, of course, and wishing you the best.
Thanks so much for having me, and keep up the amazing work. Your stuff is inspiring as well. Your website and all the stuff that you're doing too with the podcast and all your talks. And I can't believe it's almost 2 hours here, but again, sharing these stories with you guys was a pleasure, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor.
Anytime, Jirban. Take care, man.
Have a good one.
All right. I really hope you enjoyed my interview with Jirban, and big thanks to him for coming on to the show and letting us know about his really awesome experiences with the best players in the world, as well as his own experiences in getting through tough times, as well as some really great tips for us to improve our tennis games. And I really would appreciate it if you found value in this episode and learned something from it or enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe to the Tennis Files podcast and also leave a review if you are so inclined. And subscribing would be great, as it would immediately provide you with the episode straight into your device of choice that you use to listen to it as soon as I hit the publish button. So that's pretty convenient. And of course, reviews just help me learn how I can improve the show and what I'm doing right, and what I maybe could do better. So that is always helpful. And of course, it just really helps the show become more visible by virtue of climbing up the rankings and using the wacky ranking system, however Apple Podcasts and other apps do it. But thanks a lot either way. And I also want to leave you with a quote, as I often like to do at the end of the show. And this quote is by Tim Ferriss, who is a great author and entrepreneur, and I've read his books and love his podcast, which you should all check out. And Tim says, "Do not overestimate the competition and underestimate yourself. You are better than you think." And that is very true. A lot of us really don't realize the talent and potential and skills that we really have. And so that's something that you really want to sit down and objectively evaluate, and even ask other people, hey, what are my strengths? And as Jibran said, and as I harp on as well, you really want to make sure to concentrate on your strengths and use those as much as possible. And especially with tennis, use those strengths as much as possible against your opponent's weaknesses. So try to set up the point to do that, and you're going to be the most successful if you follow this approach. Well, thanks a lot for listening and hopefully learning. And again, love to hear your feedback on this episode and others. So you can catch all the episodes at tennisfiles.com/podcast. And of course, in the podcast app, just subscribe and you'll get them all. All right, this is Mehrban Ranshad. Thanks so much for listening, and see you on the next episode of the Tennis Files podcast. Take care.